So in this video we're going to look at how I used a line from the Python one-liners book by Christian Mayer, who runs Finkster, and I used the one-liner as a starting point to create an API using Python and FastAPI, and it's based on some machine learning code. What I want to do is I just want to demonstrate it to start with, and then we'll look at the code. So this is it running. I've deployed it to my own personal website, and what the code does is it takes hours studied per week, years learning Python, number of Python books you own, number of projects you worked on, amount of money you've earned using Python in the current year, I believe. And let's just make it a little bit more realistic. So 2 hours study per week, 3 years Python, right? And it gives you a rating, a bit like an ELO rating with chess. So let me just demonstrate this. Click submit. And that's not a very good rating. And if we run it again, let's see if we can make it a bit better. Let's say we do 10 hours study per week, and we've got, so this is based on some very small training data CSV, so it's not really very accurate at all. But what it does is it shows you how you can make a fast API using FastAPI. And now I've demonstrated it. In fact, I'll just show you the what's going on behind the scenes. If we do inspect and I'll run it again, go to console, and what I'm doing is I'm passing these as variables in a post request, and it's going off to my Google Cloud deployment, and the request is there in JSON. So let's look at what I've actually done. I've documented this, and this documentation is on GitHub. If you go to, I'll show you a link towards the end. It's RGGH GitHub page, and this is the API 3 project. So rather than use Flask, Heroku in particular is what everybody tends to use for demonstration purposes. However, I think a more real-world application is using Google Cloud. I wanted to demonstrate the Python code with a machine learning example and create a front end using an HTML page, and obviously host it via my existing website. Prerequisites: Python coding skills, familiarity with ML, supervised learning. So this is supervised because we know the input categories and we know the output being the rating. You'll need to sign up for a free trial with Google Cloud Platform if you want to copy what I've done here. $300 free credit, which lasts 3 months. You would need to enter your credit card details, although they promise not to charge you without telling you, and you can check your credit usage. Only specific things actually will run you up a big charge, and say they won't charge you until you've reached. You can set a threshold. I think I've got a 90% threshold limit set as well for billing, if you go into the billing in the Google Cloud console. Right, so start with Python code. So what I used was the FastAPI along with Pydantic. If you read the FastAPI documentation, you'll see that Pydantic is recommended. It enables type checking, and it provides better error checking. Scikit-learn, which is what we use for the machine learning part. NumPy, which is what we use to format the training, or format the CSV so that we can create our columns, which we can then pass to train our model. First thing, from FastAPI, import FastAPI. From FastAPI.middleware.cors, import cors middleware. This is cross-origin resource sharing. You'll only need to do this if you are going to deploy to your own website. You can read more about this on the excellent documentation on the FastAPI site. So I think we've looked at these 4 things enough. Let's go down and look at how we would then create an instance of the API class. So app equals FastAPI. I've just created the empty dictionary here. Output equals empty dictionary. That's where we will create our output that we will return, which we will then call with the fetch method in JavaScript. What I've actually done here is create some origins. Origins are effectively like whitelisting. You're telling the browser not to throw up an error if the request comes from this site. You put your own domain name in the origins. If you see some examples saying 127.0.0.1, then that's fine. That's fine for testing, but in production, you'll need to actually put your proper domain. You need to have some training data. The training data I used was from Christian's one-liners book. Weeks, year, so weeks, hours per week, that is really. Years learning Python, number of Python books, number of projects worked on, how much you've earned. So these 5 you use to train the model, and that is the output from the model. And you'll see in a minute when I show you the NumPy code how you need to slice, put all this data, load all this data into an array and then slice it. In the example that Christian did, he put in that data actually into the script. What I did was actually put that into a CSV file because I was planning on doing more projects and reusing the same data. So I created a CSV. It's called grades there. I ended up calling it questions. So your training model, NumPy gen from text. So this is loading the data from the CSV. If you've got a word rather than an integer, then you need to use D type, data type, and then S20. That's allowing up to 20 characters. If you want to print it, you'll just need to print it using UTF-8. Anyway, to create the model, this is straight from Christian's Python one-liners book. Create a variable, and then MLP regressor. That's a neural network. Maximum iterations 10,000. And then we fit the data. So data, if you remember, data actually would actually be that would be, if that was called data, then we would use it here. I'll show you the full code in a minute. Data is basically the array, and then we're saying all columns, and then all rows apart from the last one. So that's X, that's our training data, and that's the test, that's only the last column, which is the rating. So we're going to fit all of the input against the output, what I've got highlighted there. So that's all rows, and then the last column. The last column being rating, which is what we want to find, and then present on our web page to our user. So we've created a base model using, we're inheriting the base model class, and then we are saying that weeks, years, books, projects, and earnings, all integers. And then here, within the FastAPI syntax, we're saying app.post. We're using post so that we can use more than 256 characters. Sorry about that. Then we're creating an endpoint called, where did we get to? Yeah, vars. Then we are actually using, rather than fitting the data here, we're actually using predict. So neural.net predict, and then we're passing it data.weeks, data.years, books, so on, where data is actually the request body. And the request body is the class that we created inheriting base model. So eventually we get an output, and then we say the rating. So that's the name of the key. And then the value is actually what is this line. I've done it again, sorry. And then we actually say the rating is equal to the model prediction. So then we return a JSON Python dictionary saying that the rating equals the prediction from our model. Hope that makes sense. So let's look at the code. The code is pretty much what we've just seen in the README document. Yeah, so data equals np dot. So here I could use load text. If it's just a bunch of numbers, integers, then you can use load text. If it was numbers and a string, then you'd have to do gen from txt. And then that's where you'd have to do d type equals. So I've got a question CSV. There we go. And we import the data from it. We do our training. We'll fit the data to create the model and then predict. So that is how to use MLP regressor with Python. So as you can see here, this is the folder structure, and what I've done is I've created a Docker file which I need to deploy to Google Cloud. If you want to know how to deploy to Google Cloud, you need to create a Docker file which looks like this. I've used Tiangolo Uvicorn. So Uvicorn is the lightweight web server. Tiangolo is the person who created FastAPI. Hats off to him. And yeah, Docker files, you can find Docker files and modify them if you don't want to create one from scratch. What that's actually doing is it's getting Python 3.8, and then it's getting all of the requirements. Requirements, you'll need to do pip freeze, and this is my requirements.txt file as of December 2021. Forgot what year it was. So then you have a Docker file, you have a requirements.txt, and if you've got a Google Cloud account, go down here, see at the bottom of the screen, click on that, and then deploy to Cloud Run. You'll obviously need to have registered with Google, set up the $300 trial account, create a project. Everything in Google Cloud Platform is a project. So you create a project, then once you've got the project, click on Deploy to Cloud Run. I'm not going to do this in anger because I don't want to take down my current working model, but as you can see, that's the project's name. The service is the name of where you want it's named after. Europe West 2, that's the region, managed, container image. Here you can choose to do cloud build or local build. I say local build because I've got my own Docker image that I've made from scratch with a bit of help from the internet. And then you just click deploy. Once it's deployed, you would get a log file, and then in the log file you get the URL. The URL is actually then what I would put in my JavaScript file, which is what I would then consume the API with, which is this. So await and then fetch, and then I'm making a post request. I'm posting my data from the 5 input boxes, and then I'll wait for a response. When I get the response, I'm displaying it on the page. So if you remember on the page, down in red, that's the response. So top 5 were the requests, make the request, and then the response is just here. And I need to tidy that up a bit, but you can get the overall gist of it. So overall, what we've done is we've used FastAPI to create the API. and then I've just used HTML and JavaScript to consume the API. And I think it's quite a nice project to do. As I say, this is just based on some really minimal training data. Next would be to actually do another project with much more training data and make it much more real world, really, just by adding a huge amount of training data and trying to fit your model to the data and then trying to make some predictions. So I'd like to thank Christian for writing Python one-liners and giving me some inspiration. Hopefully you've enjoyed this little look at using a one-liner within an API and consuming it with HTML and JavaScript. And yeah, thanks, and hope everybody's enjoying it and have a nice Christmas. Thank you.